Here's an acronym for FAIL. First attempt in learning. I saw that years ago and I love that. First attempt in learning. Also, failure is just feedback. So I think two words that have a negative connotation, which are required to live an amazing life, is failure and discipline. And I don't see them as negative. Again, failure is feedback and discipline. It requires self-mastery, mental, emotional, and habits in order to live an extraordinary life. So I don't see those as negative things. I see them as requirements.
Heather, it is so great to see you. And I love everything you're about, specifically just having a bulletproof mindset, because it's something that when I was young, I never appreciated. And I wished I had known more about, working on your mind. I was always good about working on my body. And I felt like working on my mind kind of took a back seat. So I absolutely love everything you're about.
Thanks for having me. You know what? On that note, I literally did a post on that this morning, but think about it. Like our conditioning and programming is the external, is the body, is out there. When people don't understand that when you work on the inside out, that's why I talk about inner size or the mental gym. That's how you create and transform your life.
And what I love is you're not saying that from a position of someone who doesn't work on your physical. I've seen you push yourself, do some crazy races, and you're always trying to challenge yourself physically. And I think they just go so well together, a healthy body and a healthy mind.
100%.
Heather, can we start maybe a little bit with your background? Because I know before, if maybe I'm off on this, but I think you were in the corporate world, you weren't happy, and you kind of went off on your own as an entrepreneur. And I think I'd love to talk a little bit about how you were before you made the switch and how it's been, because I think a lot of people want that they're in that same position, but it's very scary. There's all those statistics that people prefer certainty, even if it's miserable, than uncertainty. And, taking a leap like that is a leap into uncertainty.
Yes. Well said. My first book that I published is called Take the Leap, in which I share my journey from, contentment to fulfillment. And so just a little bit about my backstory. I did what we're conditioned to do. I went to college. I got a degree. I got another one. I climbed the corporate ladder and I was miserable. I was going through life's motions, dreading Monday, cheering on Friday, week in and week out, status quo. And a lot of people are comfortable in that, and that's fine. But I also hear from a lot of people that kind of internal nudge, that knowing, that feeling I'm meant for more. And that's the question that kept playing in my mind is I was like, there's got to be more to this. So I took a huge leap of faith, and hell yeah, it was scary. But like, that's where, the cliche saying life begins outside your comfort zone. But we've all been conditioned and programmed into what I call a boring ass box. And it is this comfort zone status quo. I had a guest on my podcast once call it mediocre mentality. And it is. And it's like, I'm not judging you. This is your life to live you want. But most people are living far below their potential. And so anyway, I took a leap of faith, no plan. I had no plan, but all I knew was if I took some time off, the worst case, and this is how I talked myself into it, the worst case was I'd have to get another job. And I realized, I was like, is that so bad? Is that the end of the world? No. So I did. I quit and ended up on my own eat, pray, love journey. So took a 2.5-year sabbatical, traveling the world, quote, finding myself. I went to Bali for yoga teacher training, and all of that led me. And life is always leading us. Follow those nudges, follow those impulses. But all of that led me into podcasting and coaching. And I didn't plan any of this, but I freaking love what I do.
And how few people can say that, right? That they love what they do.
Yeah.
What was it like when you were in Bali and you were trying to figure out what is my next step? What were you thinking? Were you just like, did you have a concrete plan? Like, I'm going to try and do this? Or was it more like, well, I'm going to see it. I'm going to figure it out as I go along the way?
No, so my experience in Bali, and trust me, it was not like this amazing, relaxing. I was there for about a month for yoga teacher training, and talk about getting out of your comfort zone. And that's why I constantly do physical feeds, mental, emotional, to grow and evolve. That's what we're here for. But yoga teacher training was not easy. long days, sitting in meditation. And I call myself a recovering type A. So somebody who comes from Mach 90, go, 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 and having to sit in silence in meditation was difficult. And then going through the poses, and I didn't, here's where ignorance is not bliss. I ended up doing Ashtanga yoga teacher training. Didn't know what that was, but the dates worked for me, so I booked it. Ashtanga is a very advanced level of yoga. Like it's a very specific sequence. Anyway, long story short, I got through it. I grew and evolved, and that negative narrative, which we all experience, self-doubt and wanting to quit, it all comes down to perseverance and resilience in any area of life. So no, I didn't have a plan, but Bali then took me to Lake Tahoe in California, where I got my paddleboard yoga teacher training. And then a few months later, I was asked to come run a friend's company in San Diego. So I ran paddleboard yoga while writing my book. Life has constantly kept unfolding. And I think that's what trips most people up, thinking you need to have it all figured out. You don't.
Yeah, exactly. And if you do have it all figured out today, and life goes exactly to plan, in a one way, that's kind of sad, because it means that you're not anticipating. Because I'm hoping that if I have my loose plan for the next few years, I'm hoping in 2-3 years, I would have evolved enough where my plans are going to change and hopefully grow. They're not going to stay the same.
I'm serious. Have you met anybody that life has gone to plan? Because I just turned 40. And trust me, I thought I'd be married at 25, children by 28, and the white picket fence, because that's what we've been programmed, right? The American dream. That's not at all how my life has turned out. But I've traveled the world and I've become an entrepreneur, and it's kind of like, let go of your plan to allow something even greater. So for example, something I use and I think it's great to have goals. I think it's great to have a vision, which a lot of people lack. But also I always write this phrase, this or something even better. I'm allowing, okay, this is what I think I want, but I'm allowing something even better to unfold or show me the way, or.
So it's so interesting because you mentioned earlier you're a type A person. And I was definitely, when I was younger, very type A. And I feel like my younger self tried to force what I wanted through life and not accept anything else. And in some ways that's good. And in other ways, it's really bad. You're not being open to the opportunities. Like you said, like when you were traveling, you get these opportunities. Oh, I can go to San Diego. I can do these things. But if you are so focused on, no, I'm going to do exactly this, you're going to miss all those opportunities. That's something I struggle with a bit today. Is I'm trying to be open. I'm pretty goal orientated, but I'm trying to also be very flexible with just life, things opening up in life. And I think for type A people especially, that's a very hard thing to juggle, those two things.
So the book that is coming to mind, I highly recommend, by David Hawkins, is called Power versus Force. And you'll understand the levels of consciousness and how we function. But what it really comes down to, and again, this is a huge paradigm shift. Western culture, especially America, is hustle and grind. We glorify it and put it on a pedestal, which creates burnout and people living in survival. Instead, this book, Power versus Force, there's this fine line of being and doing. If you're only doing, it leads to stress and burnout. If you're only being, it leads to apathy. So you've got to find this fine line dance. And this is where we could bring in Hermetic principle, gender, feminine and masculine presence. And even I've had to figure that out in entrepreneurship. Like the masculine left brain is very much strategy, structure, funnels, systems. But the feminine is the creativity, the flow, the energy behind. And so it is this constant dance so that you don't burn out, but that you don't live in apathy.
That's so true. Yeah, the hustle culture coming from Europe. So I grew up in England. England is, I think the mentality is very similar to the US, like the hustle culture. But my mom is originally from France. And you go to the south of France, and I mean, 3 hours during the midday, shops are closed for people go and take a nap. And it's it's so funny coming from the US. Like I've gone to the south of France on vacation, and you go to rent a car because you got plans, and you go in there and you're like, we'll be back in 2 hours. You see the side, you're like, what the hell? You're used to things being there, ready for you. And it takes a little bit of getting used to, but I think there's so much wisdom to that Mediterranean lifestyle where it's a bit more you work to live, you don't live to work.
100%.
Yeah. What do you think? So for, I guess, the people you're dealing with a lot that you're helping, they're going to tend to be the people that are more, I'm imagining, more type A, that you need to get them to see the world opening up to them and not be so focused. Is that a fair assessment, or are they all over the map?
I'd say generally speaking, through my years of coaching, and I've coached everywhere from 24-year-old, she was referred by her dad. So I've worked with a 24-year-old up to a 74-year-old.
Wow.
So 50-year age gap, men and women, generally men, but they're always high achievers, high performers, most of them entrepreneurs and business owners. And here's where most people come to me. They might have done really well in business. Finances, I've worked with 8-figure business owners, but their health is taken a back burner. Their relationships are in the shitter. And what we uncover most of the time, people that are really driven in business are actually trying to prove their worth, seeking validation. And one of my clients, as an example, 8-figure business owner, he sleepless nights, high stress, burnout, no work-life balance, wasn't there for his wife or his children, and hadn't taken a vacation without his laptop for years. And it turns out he was a rescuer. So although he did really well in business, he needed to rescue to prove his worth. So I helped him turn the finger back around. You got to rescue you, set boundaries, which he lacked, but set boundaries and get really clear. What business do you love doing? Not that you're trying to rescue, but what do you love doing? So he was able to set boundaries, say no to things, take back his time, get back into jujitsu 2 days a week. He was coaching his little one's soccer league. He took his first cruise family vacation without his laptop. Like, he took his life back. And it really, everything we see comes down to an identity shift. That's what it truly comes down to.
I think there's that wonderful book I just finished called The 5 Different Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. And he talked about, the one thing that everyone tends to focus on is the financial aspect, but what about your mental health, the health of the friendships in your life, your spiritual health, all these different other healths you can measure, the actual health of your body. But it's so much easier. The one easiest metric to measure is finances. And it's easier to compare to other people, your finances. And, humans, we often seek validation through comparison. That's, hardwired into us. So I think I can see that again and again, where people focus on the wealth with the mistaken thought that if I can just get this much money, all my other problems in life will go away. And I remember when I was dealing with some financial hardships, and I was watching some crappy documentary late night on Netflix, and it was of this really wealthy guy, and he had all these problems. And it was like this light bulb went off in my mind. I was like, yeah, see, it doesn't matter how many billions you have, you're always going to have problems. They're just going to be different problems. And I think that's so good for people to realize. It was like that wonderful quote from Will Smith. He said when he was young and broke, he at least had hope when he was depressed. But then when he became very successful and a multimillionaire and very famous, and he was still miserable, he had nothing. He lost the hope. Because when he was young, he thought, if I can just get this prestige and this money, all my other problems will go away.
That book that you referenced, I think what it really comes down to is knowing your values. And I don't think a lot of people even know what their values are. I didn't. But Dr. John Demartini, you can go on his website and take a free value assessment. But when I did this, I then realized why I was so unhappy and unfulfilled in a 9-to-5. Because my values, I love acronyms. I live by acronyms. They're easy and fun to remember. I came up with the acronym THRIVE. Like, that is my driver. I want to thrive. And for me, that means travel and adventure. It means health and fitness. I want to realize my potential, live with intention. Let's see, V.
Value.
No, V is, to have vision and be creative. And then E is education, always learning, growing, and teaching. So you can see how for me, a 9-to-5 being stuck a cog in a wheel didn't give me creativity, didn't give me freedom. I could only travel 4 weeks a year or whatever. And so now, living my life by design rather than by default, I'm living in alignment with my values. So it feels totally different.
What about people that are, so that's a great point. So people that are risk averse and they would be miserable probably living an entrepreneurial life like we both live, then they need to know their values and know what brings them happiness. And they'll probably value the security of, say, a 9 to 5. So they'll be much happier in that type of work than more, risky entrepreneurial work.
I think you could compare me and my dad. My dad could never do what I do. Number one, he's not into personal development. He doesn't have a growth mindset. He worked one career, retired with a pension. So he has a very old school mentality. He has said, I could never do what you do because he needed stability and security of a paycheck, but he also was the sole provider for a family. I just have a different mentality, but I also, again, the athleticism and constantly putting myself in discomfort. I realize that it 100% comes down to me. I love risk. I love failure because that's where we grow. Like, put me in, coach.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A life without risk there's a wonderful saying when I first started trading, and they said every time you do a trade, you have to look at two things. What is the risk? What can I lose? And what is the reward? What can I make? And I think that's such a good metric for everything in life. If you want the rewards, you're going to have to take the risk. I don't know anything that I've achieved that I was pretty proud of that didn't have an element of risk and danger and fear and that I had to overcome to get there.
What's coming to mind when we're talking about the idea of risk? I think what's even worse is regret. So a lot of people, we know that saying, the regrets, the top 10, is it regrets of the dying is like, woulda, coulda, shoulda. And so for me, I remember, and again, it's having like community and support, but I remember being a teenager, and I've always been boy crazy, but I was a teenager with my aunt. We were in a parking lot shopping mall, and there was this really hot guy that drove by. She made me go up to him, say hi, and give him my number. So like I'm not afraid of rejection. I'm not afraid of failure. And it's kind of like everybody else who's playing small. Like, I don't want you to get to the end of life and be like, damn, what woulda, coulda, shoulda I have done with my life if I weren't afraid.
That you just reminded me. I recently read Elon Musk, the biography about Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson. And the one thing he talked about was if you're trying to, like, for instance, his rocket company, he had some rockets explode and people would look at it like, oh, he had a failure. But really, he was just testing the limits of how far can I push this? And so that was actually good data. He was trying to get the data. And every one of his companies that he built, that's what he was always trying to find out. How much can I basically have to push it until it breaks? And then I know I pushed it too far and I have to go back a bit. But I think that's so true. If you don't, if you don't ever risk failure, then you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. And I don't regret. I've had a lot of failures. I have an extinguished list of failures in my life, and like you said, I'm kind of proud of all of them because I was out there just trying. I don't regret any of them. You really do only regret the things you don't try. And I know that sounds cheesy, but it's absolutely true in my life.
Here's an acronym for FAIL: first attempt in learning. I saw that years ago, and I love that. First attempt in learning. Also, failure is just feedback. So I think two words that have a negative connotation, which are required to live an amazing life, is failure and discipline. And I don't see them as negative. Again, failure is feedback, and discipline, it requires self-mastery, mental, emotional, and habits in order to live an extraordinary life. So I don't see those as negative things. I see them as requirements.
That's so true. I've noticed that a lot of people that were really good athletes when they were young, and then they're very successful, because I'm working in real estate, in my field of real estate, is because they take the trait of discipline to showing up every day. There's so many times when you're an athlete that you have to get your workout in because it's scheduled and you really don't feel like it. Your body's sore, you're tired, you're feeling lazy, but you have to push through. And with real estate, there's so many things you have to do on a daily, consistent basis that a lot of time you won't see feedback initially, and it's easier to put them off to the next day. But the ones that are real successful are the ones that keep that idea of just treating a business like a sport where you just have to keep showing up and doing the right things day in, day out. That idea of discipline is just so important.
Yeah, and even simplicity. And it is, at some point, I found I experienced monotony in the 9 to 5, going on a hamster wheel. And entrepreneurship and kind of life, there is some monotony to it. You can find variety and do different things on weekends, but like keep it simple.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be complicated. I remember I had a guest and I always ask people, like your a morning ritual. What are your daily disciplines? But this guy had a 28-step morning routine that he used in an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm not kidding you. And I was like, okay, but wait a minute. Let's say on a bad day, what are just like 4 that you have to do? And he's like, no, I have 28 steps. I mean, to each their own, but don't complicate things.
Well, Heather, can I ask you, did that guy have kids?
I'm pretty sure he was married with kids.
Wow, because that's impressive. Because I had a good friend who was talking about his he's like, yeah, my morning routine has got to like 3.5 hours now. The things I do my meditation, I do this. And then he kind of joked. He was like, yeah, I guess that's only because I'm single and I don't have kids, right? And I was like, yeah, I'm not really a morning person. So when my son drags me up to go play in the morning, that's kind of the first thing that I have to do. But that's very impressive that he's that disciplined,
Yeah.
That's incredible. What about you? How disciplined are you with your morning routine or just your daily habits that you do?
Mine is very simple, and I use the acronym MIND, MIND. And again, like I tried a bunch of things, Robin Sharma, 5 a.m. club, and like try to follow that. And because everybody talks about, any successful person talks about morning routine, daily discipline. So I tried a bunch, and that's what I recommend people do. Try them all out and figure out what works for you. But my 4 steps. So I begin my day with a meditation. For me, that's creating presence and very intentional with my energy, and then movement. So I go to the gym first thing. I have to fill up my own cup before I can take on my day. Then I set an intention. So, today to have an amazing podcast interview, or maybe it's a client call or creating content, but I set a specific intention for that day. N is about expressing gratitude, blessing a new day. I woke up today because of an attitude of gratitude just keeps you high vibe. And then finally deciding who I'm going to show up as. Because as we kind of touched on, the idea is self-mastery is everything. How I'm thinking, feeling, and the actions I take create my results. So how do I want to show up today? That's it. Those 4 things.
The idea of the gratitude every morning, it's one of those things where every time I'm sick, and I've actually got a little sore throat, so it's not too bad. But when I'm really sick, the first thing I always say to myself is, when I'm healthy, every morning I'm going to wake up and just be grateful I can get out of bed and be healthy. And of course, a lot of the time I forget. But I heard this one guy say he has this crazy morning routine where he spends 5 to 10 minutes first thing every morning, where he just imagines what it would be like if he had no limbs and he was paralyzed. And then as soon as he ends the imagination and he gets up, he's just filled with this gratitude that, his limbs work and he can move. And I thought, well, I mean, that's very extreme, but that's that same idea of, it's so easy to take things for granted. One of my favorite quotes is, a healthy man wants 1,000 things and a sick man just one. And it's so true. It really is. Like, nothing else matters without our physical health.
I have evening practices I do, but my morning is like what sets the tone for the day. And every night I had my tech team build this for my clients, but I use it too. It's kind of like a daily reflection. So I reflect on that day and I name my emotional states and I celebrate a win and 3 things I'm grateful for. And I spend time right before bed, because this is the prime time to prime your subconscious mind, is visualizing and rehearsing mentally and emotionally those goals, that next level of me. Because when I go to bed with that state, that's what the subconscious works on. So I bookend my day, morning and night.
What do you think about, so for me, not knowing you too well, but following your content, and we've spoken before, for me, the one thing that comes across when I think Heather is just positive energy. And the older I get in life, the more I run away from negative people and negative energy. And even my wife, who I love very much, like, well, when she's having a bad day or I'm having a bad day, we kind of give each other our space because we know we have to process it. And it doesn't help when it's not, it's just, there's nothing good for you being around a negative person. And so your positivity, is that something that have you always, like, was young Heather pretty positive, or is it something you've consciously worked on just to really, like you said, with all these practices, be more, more positive, in your interactions during the days?
I think it's a mix. I was actually a super shy little girl. Like, I used to hide behind my mom's legs, painfully shy. But at home, in my comfort around my parents, I was very animated, and I was born in 85. So we grew up in the 90s. I don't know if you had this, but one of those huge camcorders, that sat on your shoulder, like we're talking big. And so my mom used to record me, and I was very animated, and I used to have a show and talk to my audience, but that was behind closed doors. So it actually took two moves my eighth grade school year for my dad's job that actually like broke me out of my shell. I had to, in that time period, it was sink or swim to stay shy and have no friends and coil, or I had to learn to be outgoing.
Yeah.
So I think it's again an identity shift, but I choose because I know what it feels like. And of course, I'm human. I have off days. I have off moments. I get my own funks. But you got to feel it to heal it. So I feel it. I go for a run. I journal. I meditate, and I alchemize. I release. But generally speaking, because it feels so good, this is just my natural state.
Yeah, I love that. I can really tell you've worked on it too. It's not been a thing that just, there's a few people that are just optimistic from day one and always happy-go-lucky. But yeah, it's most people I feel like have worked consciously to kind of cultivate that positive mindset and just being grateful. And even, you mentioned being shy. I think I was pretty introverted as a kid too. And there's so many things in the way the Western world is set up that I think is an advantage for extroverts. So I think it's really good if you are naturally introverted, just to put yourself in positions of discomfort and do things that make you come out of your shell. And I remember I always hated public speaking, and I joined a Toastmasters group 10 years ago. Just so I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I want to always put myself in positions of discomfort. And I really think that's the path to living a great life. When I was young, I thought if I work really hard now and I tick the boxes, then I can have an easy life as I get older. And now I'm older, I realize that there's certain hard things I do want to do every single day because I think it makes you appreciate the rest of the day.
Yeah. You know what, even for me, do you know Jesse Itzler?
Yes.
So Jesse, who, for those that maybe don't, he's married to Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx. Jesse's a multi-passionate entrepreneur. And what I love about Jesse is he has this big ass calendar, but he maps out his year, which I think is good and bad because again, leave space for something even better. But Jesse's big thing, I think he calls it his misogy. He does one big thing every year. So like a year defining event. So for me in 2019 was running a marathon. And then the next summer was doing an Olympic triathlon. So for me, they tend to be physical feats. But if you have a year defining event, I just think it sets you up for a life worth living.
And I'm sure like that event has to be something that scares you, that's going to challenge you, and you're going to grow from it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the hardest thing that you've put yourself through voluntarily in the last, 5 or 6 years?
I think, well, I call entrepreneurship personal development on steroids. Because the success in my business is a direct reflection of the ability to lead myself. And I can see that when I get into funks or kind of like plateaus, then I clearly see that in my business. And when I'm like in flow and going, then I see that too. But physical feat, I actually did one last fall. It was here in Colorado at Winter Park, one of our ski resorts, but it was called Elevation Everest. This was hands down the hardest physical feat I did. And I was a bit humbled because I just didn't think it's going to be that hard. But here was the event. Everest is like 30,000 foot elevation. So this was climbing the equivalent of half of that. But it was climbing 2.2 miles up a mountain, taking a gondola down, 2.2 up, Gandhi down, 10 rounds.
Wow.
So that day took me nonstop 12 and a half hours of hiking up a mountain, gondola down, and talk about like facing myself. I remember my third lap was my hardest, absolute hardest. But having to face myself when I got to the fifth lap, I was like, this is good enough. Like I've made it halfway. I could quit now. And your mind will negotiate. I've also experienced this fasting, but my mind was negotiating, wanting to quit. And then I found out there was a large percentage of people that dropped out by the fourth lap. And I never want to be average. And I was like, nah, I am not a quitter. And so I ended up getting through the whole 10 laps and I cried like a baby, but I was so freaking proud. And it's like, just understand life is a journey. There is no destination. It's all about who you become in these life chapters. But for me, for sure, but I know what I'm training for this year is definitely going to be Everest. That was my hardest.
That's awesome. So it was 10 hours?
It took me 12 and a half. It's 10 laps.
That's amazing. So what's so interesting is that's a physical challenge, but you're framing it as a mental one. And it's so true. I know exactly what you mean, because if it was a point to point 12 hours and you're halfway, you're like, well, I got to keep going. But mentally, that's so challenging because you have 9 times to quit, right? Where you're like, oh, I've done 4, I've done 5. That's enough. But you have to say, no, I got to go back down on the gondola and then go back up. So that's a much harder mental challenge than a lot of hard physical things.
You know what else? Talk about attitude, because mental attitude is everything. And people at this point had like really spread out. So there were points on the mountain. I am by myself.
Right.
So what I did, and kind of like in life, I just looked for like that next thing to look forward to. So I was like, I'm looking forward to that aid station and the aid station. And the aid stations were my everything. But I was giving high fives because high five, it's like that energy boost. And I was making fun. Now, I don't do any drugs, but I was making fun. And so the second at the top of the mountain before we get on the gondola was an aid station. I was like, guys, do you have any Coke? Like, can you get me a Coke IV? I need that boost. So then it was just this running joke every time they came around giving high fives and making jokes. And like, I just make light of it. So
that's so true.
Attitude is everything.
Yeah, it really is. If you're there physically suffering, but with a scowl on your face and, your body's not going to respond as well as if you're physically suffering, but you're happy with it. You're enjoying it. And then, of course, you're going to enjoy the whole process a lot more.
Yeah.
One of my big regrets is when I was younger and I was competing in combat sports, I'd always have this mentality where if I can just get through the next few weeks and hopefully the competition goes well, then I can relax. And I never appreciated the process until the last one. And then I said, okay, this is the last time I'm ever going to do this. And I enjoyed the process, every time, every single aspect of the days before, the morning of, the actual event. And when I finished, I was so sad because I thought, man, I could have lived the last 10 years with this same mindset and I would have probably been more successful, but I would have just enjoyed the process so much more. And ultimately, you're doing these hard things because it's going to enrich you as a human. And so why not enjoy it? Enjoy the pain, So I think just mindset really is everything, Heather.
Well said.
So what's this one you have coming up? The next challenge?
Oh man. And I tend to not talk about things till after I've completed them but I'll just tell you since you asked. It's called Rim to Rim to Rim. So it's a self-supported ultra at the Grand Canyon. It's about 46 miles round trip, but you have to do it in under 24 hours.
Wow.
So it's literally starting at the South Rim. It's going down and across to the North Rim, and then you turn around and come back. But again, it's self-supported. Mm-hmm. Now, I've joined some Facebook groups. I'm learning from other people. I have a training plan in place, but like this is not going to be easy. And everybody who posts says that was the hardest, most amazing things I've ever done. And apparently the climb out, think about this as kind of a life metaphor. Most people quit when things get hard. Mm. But the 1%ers persevere. They have grit. They have resilience. And I know it's going to take a lot and like digging deep. But 46, like I've run a marathon, but this is just next level. And you can walk it, but it's not going to be easy. It's 11,000 vert of elevation gain. But that's what I'm training for.
Wow. So I have heard of that. But if it's self-supported, I imagine you have to carry an insane amount of water. Is that right for the trip?
There are water stations along the canyon, but you have to carry all your food, supplies, backup stuff, whatever. But there are some water supplies in the river, and yeah.
I love that. I love that you're still putting yourself out there and doing these really hard things that scare you. I think there's so much wisdom there. So it's funny because my son's 4 and I'm trying to think about the things that I want to teach him. And it's so hard with kids because kids are intrinsically lazy. You know, they just, we do something and then he gets a little tired. He's like, Daddy, carry me the rest of the way. And it's nice. Sometimes I want to carry him, but sometimes I want to tell him like, no, you know, obviously he's far too young now, but I want to explain as he gets older that humans, we evolved to kind of shy away from hard things because ancestrally often that led to death and problems. But in the modern world, with life being so easy, I think the secret is in doing hard things. So I just love the fact that you're all about mindset, but you're still putting yourself out there doing really hard physical things.
You know what, though? I do have my limits. So I've decided, and it's just timely because like the Mount Everest window of opportunity to summit just closed. That's one thing. And I've thought about it and looked into it. And like, I live in Colorado, so I could train obviously with mountains here, but Everest is not something I want to do. I have limits.
Yeah. But I think that, Heather, we all, I think we have to find our limits and no one can tell, we have to figure it out for ourselves. And maybe your limit 5 years ago, you've expanded that limit more today. So, you know, never say never. Maybe you do want to do Everest, but I'm the same. I've climbed a few, like I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and I climbed some Mount Rainier in Washington. I've done some climbs, but originally I had that as a goal. I was like, I kind of want to go at least to Everest Base Camp. And then I was like, you know what? I don't have any desire for that. So yeah, we got to know ourselves. Heather, you mentioned earlier about you help a lot of people with wealth that kind of let the other important things in life, you know, go to the wayside. What about do you have people, and I guess it's going to be tough because if they're really struggling financially, they probably don't have the foresight to work with someone like you that can help them because it's another cost. But people that are really struggling financially in this economy, I feel like that's the biggest thing with my friends that I see is, of course, they all have different things they can work on, but most of them, for like with business, since 2020, life is tough in a lot of industries, a lot of business, and I've got people that work in finance that tend to have a really good 5 years, and people that work in other things it's just been really tough, you know, to pay the bills. Life just seems like it keeps getting more expensive and it's harder and harder to pay the bills. And so I've got friends that they do everything right in terms of just mental fortitude and physical health. But the common thing is just they need to make a little bit more money.
Money is 100% a mental game. There are several books on this I highly recommend. One of them, Millionaire Success Habits, great one. Another one by Wallace Wattles, Science of Getting Rich. Here's what I want people to know about money, because yes, a lot of people are in a chokehold around money. Money is literally just energy. And here's what happens. 5% of your mind, I can't help myself, right? As a mindset coach, 5% of your mind is where you have your conscious wills, desires, goals, and wishes. So you might want financial freedom. You might want financial abundance. But if 95%, your subconscious mind is full of feeling unworthy, your nervous system is dysregulated, you're living in stress, burnout, worry, lack, you have incoherence. So you want something, but you feel lack. And this creates internal resistance. If you want to get into quantum physics, this is sending out an incoherent signal, keeping you stuck in survival mode, keeping you stuck in lack. I am telling you, hands down, because I see it all the time, money is an energy game. It's an identity game. So even the stories you were telling, we live into the stories we tell. Your beliefs are only true for you. Life is a self-fulfilling prophecy, but think about it. Many of us come from, I haven't actually read the book, but Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yes.
And what it talks about more or less is like the idea of generational trauma. People have heard this term, generational trauma. So if you come from a family who lived paycheck to paycheck and barely making it, you're more than likely going to just follow suit because that's what you know, that's in your subconscious. Millionaires aren't necessarily lucky, right? But they think and feel differently around money. And so I think of the idea of a faucet. Money wants to be, think about the word currency. Money wants to be in flow. Money wants to be moving. So when you're white knuckling your way through life, as I'm holding my hands tight here, in a tight fist, you're not open to receive. Mm. So here's what I'm going to give you practical steps because I really love the quantum physics and neuroscience behind all of this. Here's practical steps. Number one, if you are struggling financially, you have a dysregulated nervous system. You have to start there, which simply means you're constantly in stress, fight or fight, lack, survival mode. That's all it means. So in order to create a shift to close the gap from, getting by to financial freedom, one, you have to regulate the nervous system. You have to create safety within. And then you have to literally you can do this through meditation, journaling. There's totally lots of different ways, breath work, but you have to create a new baseline. And then you have to be thinking and feeling, having the conscious mind and subconscious in alignment as an abundant person. I'll give real world experience. I think the stat, and I think it might be higher, 70% of lottery winners blow it all within 3 to 5 years. So we're talking people have gotten multi-million-dollar jackpots and blew it all. Mm-hmm. Here's how that actually works when we're talking neuroscience and psychology. We all have a thermostat. Think about a set point. Let's say 75 degrees. So if your set point is $100,000 income and you want more, you have to raise the set point. So for example, these individuals who won multi-million-dollar jackpots, their set point is 75 degrees, but now it just increased to 90 degrees. Unconsciously, they sabotaged, blew all the money to get to the set point. In reverse, when things get below our set point, we'll do whatever we have to do to get to the set point. So what's the takeaway?
Raise the set point.
You got to raise the set point, which is your identity.
Gotcha. So
did that make sense?
Yes. So in terms of, I do understand that where you have to get your mind and your whole spirit aligned with being someone that is wealthy and successful because it's going to attract it to you. But I was thinking more, I'll use my industry just because it's familiar and you don't know anything about it. So I'll kind of put you on the spot. So everyone that's associated with real estate the last year and a half, 2 years has had less sales than before just because interest rates went up so much. So the whole general market's gone down a lot. So I'm lucky because I have a lot of long-term relationships. So I'm doing okay. I'm doing pretty good, but I still have big goals and I still want to do better. But I see a lot of my friends who are struggling, who maybe they didn't have as many relationships. And so the general slowdown is affecting them. So I'm telling them, I guess I focus more on if I'm trying to help them, and I'm not a coach like you, but if I'm just giving them advice, I'm just like, you've got to keep doing those daily habits that add up to weekly and monthly habits. Even though you don't see the feedback straight away, you have to keep working on relationships and checking in and putting yourself out there. So that's just pure that's just the actual actions. I wasn't even thinking about, like you said, changing your whole baseline and the way you think about, wealth and where you should be in the wealth, in the amounts of wealth that's normal to you.
Okay, this is perfect. And I actually last fall went to a personal development conference and the girl that I ended up rooming with is a realtor. So I already had this conversation. So we can talk it.
Awesome.
Here's the thing about real estate. If you are listening to the outside noise, and I'm not saying it's not happening because I see my neighbors, they're staying on the market a lot longer than they used to. But I would let go of all those outside noise. And I would be telling myself, there are buyers in every market. Is that true, Lawrence?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. So here's what I would be telling myself. There are buyers in every market. What that's doing is creating confidence and certainty. Because if your realtor friends are out there taking action, but through manic manifesting, through fear and worry and lack, and there's not enough, it doesn't matter how much action, how much hustle and grinding you do, the energy behind it sucks. So you will continue to stay stuck. So number one, I would reframe a little bit Delulu, right? These young kids on TikTok say Delulu is the Salulu, and they're not wrong. But I would be reminding myself there are buyers in every market. You are correct. It's those daily disciplines. I would write down a goal for this year, whether it's number of deals or a dollar amount, and I would go all in with my blinders on my energy, self-mastery, right? My energy, my goals. And this comes down to marketing and innovation. You got to think outside the box. You have to do things differently. A lot of people, I think, have done well on social media and like getting a bigger reach. So it's not luck. People in every industry, in every economy, some excel and some fail. It is an inner game. And that's what I would tell you.
I absolutely love that. I remember when I was thinking about opening up a gym about 10 years ago, and I was like, oh, the market's so saturated already. And now if I look back to that same idea, I'm like, I don't care. I'll open a gym right next to another gym because I know my gym will be the best and I'll flourish. It's just, you're right. And I had that same conversation with my wife yesterday. I was like, I've got all these awesome buildings that I'm going to be selling. And I know that the buyer pool is smaller, but that's the overall economy. But just like you said, they're still out there. I just have to work out how to find them. So I'm really glad you said that. Yeah, there's a lot of truth that it's so easy to say, oh, the economy is not great and just use it as a limiting belief, as a built-in excuse. But it might be a little bit harder. You just have to think outside the box because it doesn't matter the overall economy. In every single industry, there's people that are flourishing and people that are struggling, right?
And guess what? Another way I would reframe it, knowing that because it's, quote, hard times right now, those other people who don't have the mental grit are going to fall out. So it's actually going to thin out, I would think. And realtors are a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
So how are you going to stand out?
100%. Heather, so we talked about, health being so important, changing your financial mindset, the way you think about money. What about dating? I've got a lot of my wife's friends who are single and they're struggling. A lot of my friends who are single and struggling. Dating today seems really challenging. And I think a lot of it it's to do with online dating. And it's just the illusion of so much opportunity out there means that people, whether it's conscious or subconscious, seem like they just put less effort into getting to know somebody. And at the first sign of trouble, they just like, oh, on to the next. And, back in the day, think 100 years ago, you had so few choices that you're obviously going to make it work with, whoever you could make it work with.
Okay, so I love dating and relationships. I myself am also single. And I took it very intentionally. I took this last year off after I was in a long distance relationship, moved to Texas for him. It didn't work out. I moved back to Denver and I was like, man, I need a break. Plus I had some things going on with my parents' health and whatever. So I took a year off because I wasn't in a mental, emotional space to be in a relationship. And that's what a lot of people haven't dealt with their stuff. And so you're coming, quote, wounded. I don't really like that word, but that's what it is. So let's get into dating. The mentality around there is, and I've worked with clients. So I had 2 clients in the exact same week say the same thing. And I was blown away. I was like, holy shit. So both of them very successful in business and financially, but came to me for the relationship piece. So here's where I would be paying attention. For those who are out there dating and want to be in a relationship. So remember, that's 5% your conscious mind, wanting a partnership, companionship, love, whatever. But if you want something, but you have opposing beliefs. So here was one. Both the clients in 1 week said the same damned thing. They want a relationship, but then they said, but I'm better off single. But you want a relationship. And then the gentleman says, all women are broken. So here he is wanting something and having negative beliefs that all women are broken, which creates misalignment. So here's what I offer. Here's my mentality. And again, I'm not saying the dating pool doesn't suck, but in a world of 8 billion people, I have a mentality that I could find someone in every city if I wanted, except apparently Denver. But here's what it comes down to. If you have opposing beliefs, you are going to unconsciously repel what you want. So you have to have your beliefs really clear in your vision, certainty and confidence. There's a perfect mate for you, and live an emotional state of feeling love and feeling gratitude. And it comes down to self-love 100% first. And then go and live your life. Because here's where this really annoying cliche is so true. When you're not looking, it happens. Why? Because when it comes down to manifestation, when you're looking, so even from work, if realtors looking, it means they're actually focused on lack, not having. So whether it's in business, love, or money, when you're looking, when you're wanting, you don't have. Like attracts like. This is a resonance game. So when you are already feeling fulfilled and whole and self-love, you then naturally will resonate and attract a like-minded person. So for me, even I just turned 40, even at 40, where a lot of people would be like, wow, here's the stories, right? You're really going to have to lower your standards. You're going to have to be okay with like, maybe not everything you want. I will not let other people's limiting beliefs limit me. So here's what I recommend: practical steps. Get really clear on what you want, and you have to be that first.
Yeah.
Pay attention to the stories you tell and the beliefs, because if you keep saying dating is hard, there's no good ones out there, men or women are broken, well, then your life is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, as soon as you say, I really want a relationship, but XYZ, it's already a losing battle. So that's 100% spot on, and good for you. Like you said, it didn't work out, but at least you'll never regret. Oh, you moved to Texas, you tried. And I think the same thing, like, it's one of those things where you'll never regret doing something like that. It just shows that, you're trying, and it's not always going to work out, but eventually it will, because you have that mindset.
Yeah, and here's another one. I love this idea. Again, remember, failure is feedback. We create clarity through contrast. So when you meet and date somebody and it doesn't go as planned, well, I created a lot more clarity on what I do want in a partner. I met a guy very recently. We had a fun night, and then I didn't hear from him for a week. I am nobody's option. I will never be an option. So that guy is not aligned for me. I don't play games, especially at this age. So I'm very grateful, and hopefully people will notice the misalignment, or what people call red flags, a lot earlier.
Yeah.
And just go have fun, go live your life, and you will naturally cross paths with whoever you're meant to.
I absolutely love that.
And don't get on a dating app. It's a waste of time.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna remind a few people of that last comment. Heather,
Yeah.
I'll give you the last word, but it's always a pleasure when we talk. And I really appreciate everything that you're about. And I just want to say, mindset is something that I think is so important. You can have two people that live the same life, but one can see it in one way and have a wonderful life, and one can have a negative mindset and go through life, not even seeing all the greatness and the opportunities. So I really love your message and what you're doing and helping so many people change their mindset. I think it's amazing.
Thank you. And thanks for this conversation.
You're the best, Heather. Thanks. I'll put some links to your LinkedIn, and if anyone wants to be their best self, Heather's there, and she's willing to help.